Hi, I'm Rob Sams and welcome back to Conversations on the Couch. I'm joined again by a good friend, James Ellis from Framework Group, who is going to continue, or we're going to continue the conversation around humanising the workers' compensation system. James, when we left our last video, you talked and introduced the concept of meeting, and we said meeting as opposed to an indifference to processing. I wonder if you could just talk me through that a little bit further.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, for example, over the years, there's been a lot of interest in psychosocial factors and how that affects people's recovery.
Yeah.
We've identified that one of the things that comes into play when people are injured, particularly under workers' compensation, is this idea of secondary disability, where the system induces more disability than the injury itself.
Yeah.
So this idea of assessing psychosocial factors has become popular, and it's a great idea. But one of the things we do in this industry is make people fill out a questionnaire. Okay?
Yep.
And there's a trade-off when you do that. They feel a little processed. We talked about meeting last time. What I found is that certainly the first time you come face-to-face with the worker, if you can perhaps step out of the workplace or go somewhere where the power differential is even.
Yes, okay.
You know, and have a coffee maybe and have a chat and ask them to tell their story. What you get back, if you listen, is not only their story, but you develop a relationship. And that has some benefits in terms of helping them move forward.
And so I know from my example of working with James, so that certainly doesn't mean working outside of the workers' comp system at all. The forms still get filled out, the processes still are done, but people don't feel like they've been processed. And, you know, what a great outcome.
We de-emphasise the forms, we de-emphasise the system, we emphasise the relationships.
Yes.
And that has some consequences that we weren't expecting.
Yeah, absolutely. So James and I work together with a large retail organisation, and I've seen firsthand some of the really great experiences that people have had. But I'm just wondering, for those listening, what are some of the things that have happened for that organisation, and what are some of the results, if you like, or the outcomes?
Yeah. So, well, for example, with this particular organisation that we've been working with for well over 12 months now, I think it's about 18 months, you know, they employ about 1,600 people, and we must have assisted over 100 people, I think.
Easily.
None of them have had to be redeployed out of this very manual handling heavy organisation.
Absolutely. And some of those have had reasonably serious injuries. Yeah, wow.
Yeah. And I guess one of the other things I'd say is that often in this industry, there's talk about, for example, insurers or doctors or employers might say to me, I wish that the injured worker would be more proactive.
Yes. Okay.
Well, that comes down to empowerment.
Yeah.
And when you meet somebody and you get their trust, it's much more empowering than when you process them.
Absolutely.
So one of the consequences of this approach is that you get a more actively engaged and empowered worker, which we're finding is leading to, as you know, better outcomes.
Yeah, exactly. I know another example just made me think there's less emphasis, if you like, on processing, but it's still done, and we still chase up medical certificates. And I remember one example, there might have been an example of someone who hadn't got a medical certificate in, and I remember you and I having a conversation about it, thinking the traditional approach is to go and follow that certificate up and emphasise process.
Or badger the worker until they get the right certificate.
Yes. And instead we said, well, that will still happen. We'll follow that up, but we won't emphasise that. So the purpose of the call might be something else, and if it's a certificate, they're great, or we can follow it up with the doctor. But my experience had been with workers' comp is that the process is everything.
Yes.
My experience with you with workers' comp is the person is everything.
Yes.
Well, certainly the key thing, and the other things happen as they go through.
Yeah, you want to know how they are, how they're going, and then you want to give them space to talk. And then, have you got your certificate can be slid into the conversation.
Absolutely.
But at a lower priority than how they are.
Yeah. And I think the last thing to pick up on is, you know, the people that we talk to give us great feedback as well.
Yeah.
You know, the very qualitative feedback that we get.
It's been rewarding, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, you know, James and I often reflect and talk amongst each other, and, you know, we enjoy things as well.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
So I think that flow-on effect is a great...
I think it's been great for our well-being as well.
Exactly. Yeah. James, thanks very much for joining us again on Conversations with the Couch.
You're welcome.
Really
Thanks for inviting me.
Great. Thanks very much, everyone. We'll see you next time. Cheers.